Hey everyone, this is Know Your Potential, NYP episode 10, and with today's guest, Tom Masterson of Support by Blue, chatting about utilizing technology to support caregivers. Welcome to the show.
You're listening to Know Your Potential with David and Phil Ngo, your source for motivational insight and discussion of all things relating to business, technology, and life. We banter and interview like-minded individuals, striving to be the best version of themselves, generate value for society, and achieve the life they want to live.
Hey everyone, it's Phil Ngo here.
Hey everyone, and we have David Ngo here. We're very excited for this show today. We have Tom Masterson. He is, Phil, you want to introduce Tom?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure Tom can give himself an even better introduction than I can. Anyways, he's the CEO and founder of Support by Blue, and I'll let him basically get into it and tell you what it's all about, because I think it's an amazing thing that he's doing for the world in terms of caregivers and just because, you know, with all this stuff happening with the pandemic, it's always nice to actually have someone supporting the caregivers. Because they're probably going through a hard time right now, right? So without further ado, here is Tom Masterson. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here, fellas. It's a bit weird being in this experience without that lady doing the introduction at the beginning of the podcast. I got to say, it's like I got very accustomed to her mispronouncing your last name, and I'm in that crowd. I can't get it right either. But yeah, so I come at this situation of approaching family caregivers from some deep personal experience, but like I like to call it a back row seat. When my mom was caring for her dad, my grandfather, with dementia, I felt very ineffective. And that really consumed me quite a bit, because it wasn't for a lack of wanting to support her that I failed in that context. So what we're working on with Blue is how to really get people like me, who are well-meaning individuals, off the bench and like really into the game. And so if you rewound history like 50 years, this was all very organic. People just saw what was going on in your house when cancer or injury or any other kind of disease, illness, ailment struck, and they just acted because it was so obvious that you were in pain or suffering and things were going wrong. And that included businesses and people. Your groceries would get dropped off by the corner store. But we advance into a world of today where, you know, you can end an entire conversation with a thumbs up on a text message, and there's literally no intimacy in those day-to-day interactions. And we've sort of lost that superpower of mutual support. So what we're doing with Blue is we've built an assistant that effectively takes on that role of the one friend with the spreadsheet and the drive to go and message all your other friends to figure out who can handle picking up the kids from soccer and dropping off a meal. And Blue is this conversational assistant, a little robot dog, very cute, that takes all the guilt and work out of that process of organizing who's actually going to do what for somebody really dealing with the crucible of a lifetime.
So how did you come up with the name Blue, if you don't mind me asking? Like it's I find it very interesting itself.
Yeah. So this is a longer story, but I'm happy to get right into it. When I was at my previous job in Toronto, which is at a design and innovation consultancy, one of my brilliant colleagues, Chrissy, recommended that I give the bot a human name. And I immediately kind of stuck to that. I thought, that's great. It lets people form a better relationship. And I called it Caroline. And Caroline was a pun on care and alignment. That was kind of the whole idea behind that name. But when I got my co-founder on board, Dylan Byth, who also comes at this from a personal experience, I can talk about Dylan in a bit too, we started to really dig into what the long-term ramifications were of assigning that persona. And there's a big dialogue right now in AI about gender and AI. And if you look at the history of all sorts of AI, whether it's Alexa on the Google Home or even the fictional computer on Star Trek, most people have assigned a female persona to those bots, and they do it because they believe it will connote a sense of warmth and care. And that, you know, full disclosure, that's what I went for, and I fell right into the gender misogyny trap of a lifetime, and almost gave the responsibility for care, which is disproportionately burdened on women right now. Like, depending on who you listen to, 2/3 to 3/4 of family caregivers are female. And reinforcing that narrative by giving a female persona the job of coordinating care. So we took a hard turn on that and decided to create this gender neutral robot dog that nobody would be confusing for a real person. In fact, most people tend to think it's male if they're going to make a mistake, which is totally fine with us. And we just wanted to come up with a gender neutral name for a dog. And we thought Blue was a good choice. And then we stumbled upon the fact that you can get domain names that end in .blue, which gives us a really sneaky way to sneak our brand into a really tiny web address for our product.
Very cool. Very amazing story. I love it. So funny enough, actually, my sister-in-law's dog, her name is also Blue. So that's why I found it all pretty ironic.
So your family would not mistake Blue for a male dog's name?
No, it's actually, Blue is actually a she. So definitely, definitely a girl over here.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, no, we'll look forward to making that a more common dog name, hopefully, if we can get
100%.
I'm actually curious, Tom. You seem to have a really large wealth of knowledge when it comes to, just running companies. Did you have any previous experience in the past before you started Blue? Like, how did you get here?
Sure. Yeah. So my career trajectory is probably the easiest way to describe how this all. And I think probably true for a lot of entrepreneurs, like nothing but what I'm doing right now would make any sense by the time you hear all this random crap mashed together. But I studied genetics in school. I thought I would follow my dad into medicine, but got hooked on business when I took my first job mostly in sales and marketing at a small medical device company in Vancouver. My boss told me that my genetics degree was great, but no one would listen to me unless I could understand balance sheets and financial statements and all those types of things. So she suggested that I go and get an MBA. And her most critical piece of advice was to either keep working, do it at night, and just keep working for me and get it all done, or go somewhere where I think we're allowed to swear on this podcast, where people give a shit.
Go ahead, swear to your heart's content.
There's no swear jar here either.
It adds more value, if anything.
Yeah. And so I just took a real big swing and managed to trick the admissions committee at Harvard into letting me in for the MBA. So I studied my MBA there. And then when I came out of Harvard, I tried my own investment fund. I hated it. I hung that up immediately. Like after about 9 months, I shut that down before I took anybody's money. It was all very much in the planning stages still. Then spent a year with a home services marketplace called Handy. So think like TaskRabbit, but exclusively for home cleaning and handyman repairs. Helped them expand into Canada. Actually cleaned a few apartments myself to go and walk the aisles and understand what that experience was like for people. It was a ton of fun. Then I went and spun out a genetic analysis startup out of UBC. So I was the first employee alongside a former venture capitalist and two life sciences professors in ecology and microbiology. So I was really the one operationally focused person while all the other lab stuff was going on. So that was my first real job where I was really holding the bag for a startups type operations. And the CEO and I really tackled just separate sides of what a CEO's job should be at that early stage of a company. And so I really got to experience the nuts and bolts of really building stuff up. He, as a former VC, he was more focused on the deal making and he was very good at it. So that freed me up a lot to do a lot of like the supply chain planning and all the types of things that you need to get right for the actual business itself to run. And then I went and worked at a innovation and design firm, which I mentioned earlier, but I really got to work purely in life sciences and healthcare. And it was there that I really took my first job that wasn't quantitative. Most of these other jobs that I did, it was like heavy duty into math and spreadsheets and everything. And at this firm, Idea Couture, I didn't touch a spreadsheet in 2 years. It was all research driven through social scientists, anthropologists, psychologists, behavioral economists, that type of thing, and gave me a deeper appreciation for those more qualitative methods for research and understanding how customers act. So like when you talk about running a company, like I've sort of done a whole bunch of different crap that has equipped me for like no defined position in the world. So I basically have to start my own company at that point.
No, but it's pretty amazing though. You have like a whole treasure trove of experience, knowledge, know-hows and everything. So I mean, pretty much taking all of that. How did you kind of decide to want to jump into starting your own company? Because I mean, prior to this, it sounded like you were always working with some other people or working for other people. So was this like kind of your first jump into starting something this big, or?
Well, so kind of. The thing that I knew was a number of things I had learned primarily through my time at Harvard, which I include like an internship at a really big company in the summer into that description. At that big company, it was like 10,000 people, not even like mega, but big enough that I got so frustrated with the bureaucracy of that company that I like just knew I can't enter at the bottom level of a company. Like that's just not going to be a place where I can thrive. And so when I took this job at the design consultancy, sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place here. The other thing that happened at Harvard was we had this actually mandatory startup competition, which was pretty cool. In our second semester, they forced everybody at the school to launch a company and literally go out and sell a product. And our group of 6 people in like 2 months launched a disposable yoga mat cover where it was like basically a gigantic Post-it note. And I was manufacturing prototypes and running the shipping out of my dorm room at business school and like sending stuff out of the post office. And it was like the little nugget of my previous career that I really enjoyed. Like, and I got to do that purely just hacking together stuff. And so it was pretty obvious to me this was going to be the eventual course. And at this consultancy, I told my boss when I was being interviewed, he said, "So what do you think is next for you?" And I'm like, the day I quit this job is the day I start my own company. And he knew that going in. So I'm like, you're not going to lose me to a competitor. I don't want to be a consultant anymore after this. I will start my own business and that will be that. And we had a couple projects there that were focused on the family caregiver experience. And once a few light bulbs went off as to like why I sucked at supporting my mom, like once that actually became a bit more clear to me that I'm like, oh, I get it now. Then I became kind of obsessed and I'm like, okay, I got to quit. I got to go. I cannot stay here anymore because it's like under my skin and I had to go do it.
So pretty much you had your own problems and that's where you kind of had started the whole idea of it, starting this company, pretty much fixing a problem that you saw.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Like what most people that are in this space, they're focused on solving problems for the family caregiver. And we are too indirectly, but we're really focused on solving the problems of all the other people, which was the problem that I faced. And we think of it like the airplane oxygen mask, like fix your own mask before you can help someone else. If we get all those other people equipped to do the job, we don't even have to worry about the family caregiver because that entire community will take care of them without our intervention once we have them properly equipped.
Right. Yeah, that's the same philosophy we have with like first aid, for example. You know, you don't want to be running into a situation where you become a victim as well, right? So
I suspect that's true. Yeah, it's very funny how people don't stop to consider that type of how good intentions can go the wrong way without the proper preparation and tools to be equipped with.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Just to clarify quickly, when did you start this company? How long has it been?
It's been about 2 years, although various iterations. We've really been on like what the core concept of Blue is for like a year and a half kind of thing.
So, and then what was the most difficult part of challenge you had starting this business right now?
So in this business, it's very funny. So like I'm trying to go down the venture path, which, involves raising all this money and moving fast and breaking things and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the cost of failure in this world that we operate in is so vastly different than the majority of companies that a venture fund would look at, particularly with interaction with broad sets of consumers. And what I mean is when you if Instagram crashes, no big deal. But if a cancer patient doesn't get their ride to the hospital, that's a little bit different. So the biggest issue for us has been managing investor expectations around speed, around the types of things that the choices we make. Because most people, when you go and pitch them on something, they don't want to hear that you've been taking your time in this space. And so some investors get it right away and some investors don't. And I've sort of taken the approach that the investors that don't get that probably are not the ones that I want on the cap table. But that's how we've been thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, like definitely when it comes to looking for venture funding, I also feel the same way in the sense that you want investors to really understand the sort of philosophy and the way that that you go about building your product. Whereas I've met VCs where all they care about is return, and how much money do I get and when do I see it. I don't know if you've run into like this huge problem with VC kind of funding before.
Well, yeah, always. I mean, I think that's the nature of the beast, and you can't really blame them. They need to have 1 or 2 investments per fund that returns like 100x. Otherwise, they're not doing their job. So they need to look for that big picture idea. But especially at the seed and pre-seed stage, it's tough for them to like grasp the idea that somebody should be moving slowly at that point, even if it might turn into a really massive return. Like, it's funny, in the genetic analysis world, this is known. Like, you just know that it's going to take 10 years to get your product to market, and then it might be this gigantic thing. Whereas in software, people can't really grasp with that expectation. They can't grapple with it, I should say. So it's just a lot of expectation management, to be honest, is the hardest piece. Because if you take your time, our business is all about trust at the end of the day. And the best way to win trust is to totally take your time with a small number of people, understand their story, make sure that they're heard, they get all their needs met. Because if you win the trust of one person going through the worst moment in their life, they'll do your advocacy for you. And that's how we've had most of our success in getting some of the bigger accomplishments. Like, for example, we've been dealing with a family with dealing with pediatric cancer, and it's effectively just through them that we've accessed a major pilot with BC Children's Hospital. And it's like, we couldn't have just knocked on BC Children's door without having built that type of equity with them. And I mean equity in the sense of trust, not in the sense of stock ownership or anything like that.
So, I mean, speaking about that, actually, we actually recently used your services also, right? For Phil, for your mom. Did you want to share that little story about how we're using it for your mom right now?
Yeah. So basically, like, I am one of the users of that platform, and I found it to be a really great experience for us to be able to manage a bunch of different aspects of garnering the sort of care, the raising of funds, the management of funds, and just like being able to actually not have to worry about so much, because a lot of the stuff that we would have need to worry about can be taken care of with the platform. Like, for example, it allowed both my sister and I to be able to reach networks further than we would have been able to by like our own emails alone. Right. And at the end of the day, what it does is it creates this, because you're using like a reputable platform to be able to do all of this. It doesn't sound, as bad, and you kind of have like a much better, you have like technology, which is basically helping you amplify your voice. And that's what I've always found technology to really help people with, was, to make it easier for me to, instead of calling 5 people, I just use this platform, and it's able to basically spread the message and help with all the administrative stuff in, a few clicks of a button.
And what's really cool about this also is the fact that, like you said, when you're sending out these messages to everyone, whoever receives it doesn't have to feel bad about turning it down, right? Because it's automated. It's one of those, hey, if I can help, I will. If I can't, I won't. But it's one of those things, when I get a message directly from someone, I always feel so bad saying no. So, I mean, this kind of takes out that little awkwardness from the situation is what it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, one person could maybe manage 10 or 20 people if they're devoted to it full time of like that person's contacts. But with Blue, like we're able to go 40, 100, 200 people, no problem. And like you said, David, like expands the ability to say no, because you can feel pretty good that somebody else is going to be there to step in. And also, like, because we've done the same thing, like one of the best things from your family's experience, that was the first time we saw overseas engagement around a care situation. And we had somebody from Italy buying your place shakes for your mom, Phil. And like that to me was a major validation moment, because it rejigs like what we perceive the meaning of community to be. Like when people would say it takes a village in the past, I always kind of scoff these days, because the village is gone. We don't live in them anymore. Like that is not the construct in which we operate. But maybe it could be. And if we can think of a village in a digital sense, then we're going to start to open up all sorts of opportunities to improve experiences for patients, caregivers, even just like new parents, and like there's so many opportunities if we can just get that mojo of a village back, but like through a digital first pathway. That's like the big overarching like juicy piece of what Blue's all about.
And that's a cool thing with the internet, right? It's pretty much borderless. So I mean, again, you can reach and contact anybody around the world and hopefully get a response immediately also, again, versus, the regular way of sitting here, calling people, can you do this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Getting a hold of them or not getting a hold of them. So again, this takes out a lot of that, legwork that needs to be done.
Yeah. And here's the flip side of that issue though, because it's something that I think about probably more than anything else. I think we're entering this era of brand trust where, like, if you look at like Edelman data, Edelman does these trust barometer studies and stuff. Consumers now, trust in a brand is second only to price for purchasing power, like for what influences purchases nowadays. And so trust in a brand is dependent on all sorts of things, like, well, what is your social impact philosophy? Like, do you treat customers with respect? Do you treat the planet with respect? It's interesting now that we are going to force ourselves to start thinking about trust first and foremost. And I think the two of you will be really interesting to have a discussion about trust with, because obviously cryptocurrency is dealing with that constantly right now. And like, it is like a huge issue. But one thing I think is really interesting, David, I'm curious for your story on this. Like, you built a trustworthy brand around dog poop bags. Like, what did you do? Like, what made, for some reason, people trust the brand of Earth Rated? And like, the green mantra, I guess, but like, what did you do? Because I think there are lessons to learn there for like those of us that have to really remove ourselves from the product and think like, what's the basis for trust? Like, how did you accomplish that?
Pretty much what you said, right? Is one of those winning customers one at a time, offering a great product, great service, pretty much making people feel good about using your product, your services is really what it is. And for us, it took us a good about 11 years so far to build the company to where it is now. So there's real no magic trick to it. It's really just year after year, going to trade shows, talking to people, promoting it. And again, for us, one of the biggest things was all about marketing, branding, or being available in social media. You know what it is? It's pretty much having a voice out there. So again, the way you present yourself is how people see you. And for us, the biggest thing was pretty much, constantly presenting ourselves, the owners, all the people who work there, all the shows that we did, all the things that we did. So we were very visible. And that kind of allowed people to, I guess, trust us or trust our company a bit more than, let's say, the competitor, which was just a company that sold a poop bag, and there's some random company from some country, wherever it was. So it's one of those things, really just putting yourselves out there. And the more you put yourself out there, the more people will trust and feel you.
And interesting, do you think that it began with the message or with the consistency? Like, did you guys always have the message that you landed on? Like, was it always, this is going to be?
No, for sure not. You know what it is? Again, over 11 years, even the first year, we kind of didn't know what we were really doing, to be honest. It's kind of just, hey, let's just buy poop bags and kind of sell it. Again, no one really grows up or goes to school and lives their whole life expecting or thinking, hey, I'm going to start a company that's going to sell poop bags. That's the reality. They kind of just stumbled upon it. And then from there, again, it's just every single day, we just kept pushing, kept working. We learned from our mistakes. We had a lot of different help. We had advisors. We had different things. Again, it's one of those things of just the more you do, the luckier you get. That's really what it is, right?
That's so fascinating. Phil, when you think about like crypto, Bitcoin has like probably the highest degree of consumer trust, right? I would assume Bitcoin does.
Oh, definitely. In terms of that whole realm, I mean, Bitcoin having that strong brand, like going back to brand, whenever anyone thinks of cryptocurrencies, the number one thing that comes to mind is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And it's still trying to actually brush off this negative connotation of it being used only by criminals and
Sure.
and people who are trying to launder money. Like it struggles with that because it's been branded that way by people who had opposed the purpose of that system in the first place. And but going back to like the brand stuff, I mean, like that's how powerful something is. Like I can probably mention the word Ethereum and probably, I don't know, 5 to 10% of people listening to this might know about it. Yeah.
But so it's really interesting. Do you think from like a product characteristic point of view, and maybe it's not correct to call Bitcoin a product, I don't really know because I'm stupid on this stuff. Is Bitcoin actually more trustworthy than other coins, or is it just more known and therefore has a higher like acceptance in the market?
Well, trust basically comes down to the security model of how secure this is.
Mm-hmm.
And just through not just the cryptography aspect of it, but the way the rules are enforced on something like Bitcoin, it is very difficult, especially if you do understand how the technology works. It's very difficult for you to not trust the system knowing how it functions. Like there's enough power or energy going towards the honesty of and integrity of maintaining that blockchain then there is available for you to divert that. Like it's not very easy for somebody to actually turn Bitcoin into something it's not.
But at the same time, I think the reason why Bitcoin is so trusted and it's the ultimate brand, which we spoke about before, I think it's because it's one of the only coins, the only coin that has a virgin birth, right? Meaning there are no company or no owners of Bitcoin per se. Whereas with every single other coin that came after that is owned by people or X amount of people or how they organize and set it up. Whereas again, Bitcoin, no one controls it. So that's why I think, again, that gives it the air of mystery so much more interesting and sexier in that sense.
Mm-hmm. It's really the grassroots aspect of it. And I think it goes to a lot of different companies as well, who literally build their company from scratch, from the ground up. It's the same aspect of going in and just building something and not having any sort of political or economical sort of influence necessarily to try to sway it into a certain direction.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And in some way, I guess it's the users are pretty much the owners of the company, let's say, right? Again, so versus, owning any coin from any other companies, there are people who are at the top and you're at the bottom owning the coin. Whereas with this, there is no owner and everyone who owns it is the owner of Bitcoin company, let's call it that.
I've also been remarking lately about how Bitcoin is suddenly benefiting from the aura of other trustworthy people and institutions and everything. So like there's an element of that. We do that with Blue. Like we want our services to be affiliated with organizations like BC Children's, like for sure. Like that's like a big boon for us. And like we think of it as like a barrier to entry and a validator. And like I look at credible names suddenly pouring into the crypto space and choosing Bitcoin as just a marker for everybody that will just only serve to reinforce that and only take away some of that sort of Silk Road persona that you were talking about there, Phil.
Yeah. I mean, the goodwill aspect really helps reinforce the network effects, and the network effect is the hardest thing to really create. Like for example, why would somebody choose earth-rated poop bags over some Joe Blow bag? Or why would someone choose Blue? over? I'm not even sure what your competitive landscape looks like, but
I was going to
But
ask
yeah.
you, who is your main competitor? Are there other companies or platforms out there that offer a same or similar service?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say like in terms of the actual consumer experience, and like I can give you guys some of the hints of what the business model are too and everything. But in terms of the actual consumer experience, the vast majority of people have like a friend with a crummy spreadsheet or like a paper calendar or something like that. It's junk. Like it's completely ripe for getting rid of it. There are a couple of other players. There have been a few that have existed over the years that have focused on a particular niche of community engagement. Like there's Meal Train, which is like something you can just set up to like organize 2 weeks worth of meals around somebody. Actually works quite well. And then there are other things. One that we know about that's doing some cool stuff is called Diana Care out of Boston. And they're very open. So like anybody can sign up and create like a private community. So they've like built sort of like micro ecosystems of trust more than anything. So you could invite people to support you. There's like no cash transacted on the platform or anything like that. It's just, your own personal um, trust and relationships with people is like sort of what drives that. I don't know of anybody else that's really approaching it the way we are with the conversational aspect to build like more functional communities than just a static interface. Nor do I know of anybody that's really doing it through the institutional lens of like garnering trust by having it exclusively available to patients of certain hospitals and nonprofits. But yeah, it's let's back up 1 second here to sort of detail why most people shy away from this problem. If you treat your main user as your customer, which is not necessarily a requirement for a business, but it's the most direct path, you couldn't come up with a worse customer in the world. Like you would go into a lab and you put together all your ingredients and you get somebody who's taking care of someone with cancer. Like they've lost their job, they're stressed out, they're emotionally compromised, they're in no position to make a decision to manually build some like little community for themselves. It's the worst. So you need to make it ultra easy for those folks, and ideally charge someone else to make your profit on this. And so a lot of people don't get that, and they make huge mistakes going into it. Like it's the last thing you want to do is put another task on this family or this person's plate. And there's nobody that I can see that's really doing a great job of taking all that off of them. That's sort of what we're focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with that, I mean, there must be some near-term and also some long-term goals that you're trying to achieve with this. Where do you at with that stage, and what do you see coming in the horizon in the next year or two for Blue?
Yeah, so we're going into this really amazing pilot with BC Children's right now, which is going to get us into like more like the hundreds of families kind of thing using the product. So we're still, despite being a couple of years into this, still fairly early on the product journey. And this is what I talk about with going slowly. But once we start that process of getting more and more families in, then we start to create this beautiful like community, like this meta community of people who are devoted to providing support. And the big goal there is to continue to expand that through various different institutions. And what we will effectively build, this is giving away a little bit of the strategy. I think of it like it's an API for cause marketing. So cause marketing is where a brand will partner with an institution, and they don't even necessarily need to partner if they're at a big enough scale, but they do something that's not just an ad campaign. They're actually going out trying to make a difference somewhere. So like a great example is Lyft goes out, and whenever they want to do well in the market, they form a partnership with a local hospital, and they offer rides at a discounted price or for free to patients. Like they do it a lot with children's hospitals and other hospitals. The issue for Lyft is that they have to redo that every single time they go to every single city, and it's a huge partnership effort to get that thing off the ground. So eventually what we want to have is this big network of all these hospitals with their associated patient populations and communities, where if some other brand wants to come in and do a piece of cause marketing, which is a great way to win consumer trust and build brand these days, they can kind of do that at a flip of a switch, and they can do it in a way that's relevant to them. Maybe they want to win in the Southwest, or maybe they want to be known as somebody who supports people facing spinal injury, which I think, that might resonate with climbing companies or something like that. And if we can accomplish that, then we'll have built like this really amazing engine for brand trust, and it will be a far better alternative to spending millions of dollars on Facebook and Google ads. It'll be like this really cool mechanism by which one campaign directed at 10,000 families with childhood cancer is actually 10,000 stories that all these families and their communities tell amongst each other about how company X helped our family get through this hard time. And that's sort of like the big juicy goal for Blue around like severe caregiving scenarios. There are other applications for just general community coordination, but that's the one that I see as like close to my heart, is the one that I definitely want to see happen, because those businesses have a role to play, just like that corner store in the village we talked about earlier did.
So as it stands right now, do you have any other investors that are already invested in the company? Are you looking for investors, or how does it work? Or is that still secret, or how is that?
It's not secret. I mean, it's been just friends and family checks, like small ball stuff for the past little while. And we've been warming up some investors over the last little bit. What we expect to do is, having formed a few of those relationships, put about a month of data in on this hospital pilot, and then turn around and show them like what the actual larger stats look like, and then go out and raise what would be defined in the Valley as probably like a small seed fund, round, I should say, couple $1 million or something, to go and hire a bunch of developers and really start to scale this quickly across Canada and the US. And that's Canada and the US is like where the patient populations and hospitals and nonprofits are that we want to focus on. Obviously, we can have users that live all over the world that can contribute to families that live in those jurisdictions, but that's where we want to go.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could attest to the fact that like a lot of the times when it comes to startups and raising money, the pre-seed and the seed will keep you up all night. And so like one of the hard things that a lot of people who are trying to break out in their own companies or trying to raise money so that they could feed themselves, what kind of advice would you go out there and give to some of these founders who are trying to, do exactly what you're doing right now? Like, what would really help them keep with their dreams and keep running with it?
Yeah, so a few things that I've learned the hard way. One is there is such a thing as approaching an investor too early. A lot of people would try to say, no, form your relationships ahead of time. But if you come to an investor and you're not going to raise money for another 6 months or a year, all you've done is given them sort of like an easy way to wait for more. They always want to wait for more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The best advice is to maybe have your first contact with someone a month or so before you're going to hit them with the pile of bricks of information and value. And then that allows you to like really own an intense deal making like period of time. Like the narrative just becomes a lot stronger. I think a lot of venture capitalists would love to, I mean, they're people too. Like they have responsibilities, but they also get thrills from the same things that we get thrills from. Like if you enjoy going and getting the deal at the store, so does a venture capitalist. Like they want to know that they're getting the deal before anybody else is getting it. It's 100% true. So there's an element of building that just frothy demand for your deal. I wouldn't consider myself very good at it, but I know that it works. So that's something to really dig into. But one thing that I'll say is like, to take one further step back, is that to raise money or do a business like this authentically, there has to be something about it that you are in love with. And everybody says like, you have to fall in love with the problem. I'm not even sure you need to fall in love with the problem, but there's got to be something where it's like an obsessive level of commitment to what you're doing. because otherwise, you'll hit that first like investor that tells you that your business isn't a real business and you'll give up on it. But like for me, I don't view the current state of the world as acceptable. Like it drives me nuts that people have trouble getting help from friends that actually want to help them. Like that is broken beyond belief to me, and it infuriates me. I think an equally valid reason is like, you want to go out and make a bloody fortune. And if that is the reason that you can get up and run your business and go crazy about it, I hope that you have some element of good in you to do something a bit more global. But shit, that's a very good reason to go start a business. Honestly, like people want to pretend like it's not. It is. Like if you want to make a bunch of money, go make a bunch of money. I would encourage people, if they're going to do that, to do some good along the way. But shit, I mean, ambition is ambition, and I think that that's actually a good thing. But yeah, I think it's just like one of those. You better be 100% is the minimum requirement for this kind of stuff. So those are like the big pieces, I guess. I could probably talk about this for hours, but I feel like I'm rambling.
I mean, that's the reality about any business owner, right? You have to be 100% committed, passionate, think about it day and night, and always looking at every single thing. How can I fix this? This random thing that I see here, that can work for my business. This random thing that I spoke about with this person, oh, that can also be a good thing. So it's just, you're constantly running 24/7 in your mind. Because again, it's not one of those 9 to 5 things like, all right, it's 5 o'clock, I'm checked out, I'm not thinking about this project anymore. That's not how it is to be a business owner at all, right?
Yeah. I read something. It was like a quote of a quote. So the original quote was out of the movie Lincoln. And apparently at one point, I haven't gone back to check that this is actually there. Lincoln remarks, "A compass can tell you where true north is, but it can't tell you about the wind you'll encounter on the way." And I thought that was such a poignant statement, because like we all have these aspirations and notions of what the end point is. But the reality that lies between you, like you better be very resilient and ready, and frankly prepared to say maybe the better direction is northwest and maybe the better direction is northeast, and I better be able to adapt to what the terrain tells me, because that reading on the compass back then was a snapshot in time, and the world can change very quickly on you, and if you're not ready for it, you're boned. So yeah, that's I like to think about it that way, and 100% all in, but flexible, and maintain your focus, but be aware. I mean, it's all just it's mind melting to kind of think about all the permutations that you have to go through as a business owner.
And the worst thing to be is pretty much stubborn, right? Being stubborn as a business owner or a startup is the worst thing, because if you have one thing set, some people say it's a good thing, but again, you have to be like the waves. You have to follow the waves, or the way it goes. You kind of go with it. You can't fight it. You just have to go with it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that there's a great psychologist at Wharton at University of Pennsylvania named Adam Grant, who's like well known for Give and Take, and his newest book, I've yet to read it, but it's called Think Again, and it's like about inviting people to revisit their previously held notions in a way that's more like introspective. And the idea isn't necessarily to change your mind, but it is to have the openness to consider the alternatives. And I think stubbornness, I think is the right word, but I think that there is room for conviction. And I'll never forget when I was at Handy, that home service marketplace, the CEO came in one way, and we'd been growing almost exclusively through Groupon. And that's how a lot of these VC backed companies do. Handy had raised like 35 million at this point. And it was like, that was our growth engine. And the CEO came in one morning and he's just like, no. and he's like, we're turning off Groupon at the end of the day. And everybody freaked out. The head of marketing was just like, that's like, you've basically taken away my only lever to pull. And he just goes, these are the worst customers we've, like, by and large, the ones we get organically are more reliable. We retain them better. They submit fewer complaints. They're more profitable. They're bad customers from Groupon. We don't want them. And it hurt for like the next couple months, business sucked. But man, was he right. And then at exactly the time that we were starting to turn the corner as a business, all those lawsuits started to come out around 1099 employer classifications. Do you remember all that? Like when Uber got sued by like the government of California, all that kind of stuff. And when all of our competitors went out to raise rounds because they were broke, nobody would touch them because it was this moment where the terrain had shifted on them and nobody's funding these companies with contract gig workers anymore. And meanwhile, Handy is sitting there pretty like, we actually don't need money. And we were the only ones that survived out of that. Like the group of people we considered our chief competitors, like we knocked them out of Canada and then they folded in general, like about a month later. And it was just, he had the conviction to stick with what he knew was right. And everybody just thought he was stubborn and being a jerk, and nope, he was right. And I don't know what gave him the fortitude to know that that decision was correct, but man, did I admire it, because I don't know what most people wouldn't have had the ability to like say no to their 200 employees all screaming at you that this is not the way to do it.
And I think that's one of the most important things to have as a CEO or leader of a company, is that you have to kind of go with your gut feeling, and you kind of just have to go do things when sometimes other people don't understand or it doesn't make sense to them. Again, it's your company and you have to lead. And again, hopefully those decisions are actually the right ones. But again, I feel like there's been a lot of shitty stories about, owners who says, you know what, I felt this way, but I chose not to because I wanted to follow the way things were always going. Yeah. And that's what killed me in the end. So again, just always going with your gut feeling is so important as a business owner.
Yeah, one of the big things that I've learned is really just to keep an open mind. And at the end of the day, like, and the other thing is accountability. We're not always right, but as long as we can own up to it, we learn from those mistakes. The thing is, we gave it a try, and I'm glad when people actually, counter my arguments and actually want to basically poke holes in it, because that's how a successful business thrives. If you had everybody thinking the same way in their own think tank, you would be doomed to fail, because you don't see anything that's wrong with what you're doing. And a lot of the times I even see that in the Bitcoin community too. And I've always made it a thing to say, if you think the guy's crazy, just make sure you hear him out, or her, because at the end of the day, they have a different opinion, and they have something to say, and you can't necessarily just discount it because you think they're crazy.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah.
I think a similar thing that I'm going to carry with me into old age is to listen to young people, because they tend to have like a good read on where the world's going better than people who are entrenched in it. And I think that's very similar. Phil, did they have any frameworks for this kind of like open-mindedness when you were in the service, or did you have to like invent these? Like, was it backwards? Did they have zero openness? Like, I've seen both in military settings. I'm curious.
Yeah, the military is a whole different beast. I would not even compare it, because it's just the way the dynamics work. It's so different. It's very hard for you to get your voice usually gets stopped by the next rank up. So yeah. It's unfortunate, but I mean, like, I've experienced this before, even when I was talking about Bitcoin back in 2013, people thought I was crazy, and I'm like, well, we know who's laughing now. So just keep an open mind, I think is really just the best way to go about it. Speaking of that, where can people go to actually learn more about Blue and about you and the product?
Sure. It's not too hard to find either, I don't think. We try to be Support by Blue everywhere. So Instagram @SupportByBlue, Facebook.com/SupportByBlue. I do a fair amount of writing and everything on LinkedIn. I'm around there. I tend not to accept connection requests unless people send me an actual note. I find it very obnoxious to just get a random invitation. And on LinkedIn, our slug is actually caregiver-support. We wanted to appeal more to people from a B2B standpoint for the link, but we're still listed as Support by Blue on LinkedIn. Yeah, that's about it. Lots of places to find us.
Awesome. So really, we appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on and telling us about your product. we think you're doing great, amazing things for the world. And honestly, kudos to you, because it's very hard to break into healthcare. And healthcare, you know, is always littered with red tape, bureaucracy, and stuff. So that is one of the hardest type of startups to actually get involved with.
No, absolutely. Again, what you're doing is amazing. You're helping people, people in need. You're making it easier. You're reducing suffering. And again, you're helping a lot more than a lot of other people who are just out there to make a quick buck off of whatever cool, awesome, funny app they're doing, or some cool video stuff that gets people just, you know, sticking onto their phone and staring at it for endless hours, doing nothing at all. So again, what you're coming out with is so much more helpful and beneficial to the world than a lot of other stuff that's going on right now. So again, we really appreciate your time and effort you're putting into this, man.
Means a lot, fellas. I know you both know what it's like to sacrifice your income for a few years while you're building something you believe in. So that's like quite meaningful to me for you guys to say that. Thank you.
So again, if there are any investors out there that are listening to this, that are interested, please feel free to reach out to Tom. He's more than happy to chat with you. And again, after this episode, you guys should have a good idea as to what Tom does. And please reach out to us, to Tom, and we'll be more than happy to talk to you some more.
Yeah, make sure you send a custom note as well, so he doesn't just ignore it.
Not a blank invitation. Not a blank invitation. Tom will reject that shit right away.
Yeah, my snobbery is at an all-time high. Oh, well.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for listening this week. It was great to have Tom Masterson on. We'll be back another time. So thanks, everyone, for listening. You know where to reach us. knowyourpotential.com is where you'll find all of our social media links, and you can connect with us there.
Thank you very much for listening, guys. Have yourselves a great week.
See you, gents.